Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Coco and Daltz. I'm not Daltz.
And I'm not Coco.
You have to do the voice, even though you're not actually doing the intro.
I'm doing my intro voice at this time.
Well, we decided to mix it up a little bit today. We're going into the...
Mixing it up.
We're hitting the Wayback Machine, and we're going to talk about something we haven't talked about before on the podcast, which is why doesn't this person have a bigger career? And the person we've chosen to talk about today is Kurt Russell. So
None other than Kurt Russell.
Goldie Hawn's paramour, solid B-list actor for at least 40 years.
B plus.
B plus, you say B plus?
I'd say B plus.
Okay. So we're going to look at his body of work. We're going to look at what he's done, what he could have done, what he turned down doing, and talk about why he's not Kevin Costner or Mel Gibson or even Harrison Ford.
So, Kurt Russell burst upon the scene as a young Disney actor.
Which usually does not bode well for child stars. Like, usually they just go straight down a rabbit hole of cocaine and whores. But it doesn't appear as though Kurt Russell did that.
Kurt Russell is the exception to the child star flame out pattern. Mm-hmm. He actually was a very young actor and was in a lot of he was an actor from the Wayback Machine. So he was 1962 was his first appearance on television. He was in Dennis the Menace.
And how old was he then?
Now you're going to make me do the math.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
just ballpark it.
He's born in 51.
Oh, so he was like 10, 11 years old.
So he was 10 or 11 years old.
See, I could do math with all that wine I've
had drinking. You didn't need
drinking.
my help with the math.
Right.
So he started, that was his first appearance. It was uncredited, his role.
Well, then how do we know he really did it?
Well, that's true. If you appear in a movie and it's uncredited, did it really happen?
Right, totes.
Like Kevin Spacey in Seven, for example.
Which we just watched last night.
Which is a different topic altogether.
Right.
Yes. But so he appeared in many things over the years as a child actor, including The Man from U.N.C.L.E. These are just the notable appearances. He was in Gilligan's Island.
What?
As Jungle Boy in one episode, and the episode is called Gilligan Meets Jungle Boy.
Oh, wow. So he had a pretty meaty role.
So he was in the lead there.
Wow.
I don't remember that episode, but now we're going to have to go and see if we can find that. He was in the TV, the original Lost in Space, 1966. He was in the FBI. He was in The Fugitive. He was in something called The One and Only Genuine Original Family Band.
Oh, I think I read he maybe met Goldie Hawn originally on the set of that.
That's right.
And then they reconnected like 15, 20 years later in the 80s.
Later, yeah. He was also in, and so his most noteworthy role when he was just a wee laddie was as Dexter in the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes.
Which I totally thought you were making up.
You thought I was making that up. When I said, oh yeah, he was in the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, and you're like,
and I was like, sure, Jan. And
very funny, adults.
And then I actually looked up the Wikipedia page for Kurt Russell, and I was like, oh, you were right.
As if anybody would make a movie called The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes.
And then he signed a 10-year contract with Disney, but then he took a couple of years off to pursue a baseball career.
Yes.
And he played a few years of minor league ball and then got injured and went back into acting. And it's in the 70s, and it's been pretty successful for him. But we want to know exactly how successful it perhaps could have been, and why hasn't it been?
So let's look at some of the movies that he did after his baseball career went kaputski.
Because once he teamed up with John Carpenter in the very early 80s, he made the transition from like TV to movies.
That's right. So his big moment on TV was when he starred as Elvis in the Elvis movie. And I'm talking about Elvis Presley.
Not
Elvis Costello.
Oh my God, that would have been amazing. Which he was nominated for an Emmy for.
So that was his big moment where people was like, oh, wait a minute, this kid can act, or now this guy can act. Mm-hmm. He's not any schlub. So he gets a role in a movie called Used Cars as Rudy Russo, which is 1980. However, the next movie that he is in is Escape from New York.
Which we just watched a couple days ago, which is what inspired this podcast topic.
Right.
So lucky you, listeners.
Look at you. We're always thinking about you, the listener, whenever we're doing anything in our home. So Snake Plissken was an iconic role. Needless to say, I don't have to explain it probably too much to people because they were, even all these years later, I think people know who Snake Plissken is. Mm-hmm. However, the plot of Escape from New York was the president's... so Manhattan is a walled fortress of a prison. No rules. Everybody who's a criminal gets thrown on the island.
It's just kind of Lord of the Flies.
It's Lord of the Flies. It's many movies put together and books and other creative works. And so if you find yourself on Manhattan in this version of the future, which takes place in 1997, then you're in big trouble. You're a criminal who has no escape because Manhattan is walled. So what happens is Snake Plissken, who is Kurt Russell, becomes a criminal, gets sentenced to Manhattan, goes in there at the same time, virtually, as the plane of the president somehow crashes onto Manhattan Island.
And he has to go in and rescue the president within 24 hours.
And it's not because he's just a nice guy, he decides to do this. They inject him with some sort of explosive device that will blow up in 24 hours if he doesn't come back with the president. So he's motivated.
Right. And what else was Kurt Russell in the 80s? Like,
so
Escape from New York really kick-started his career as a movie star.
Yes,
right.
His theatrical career was kicked in there. So he was Copper in The Fox and the Hound that same year.
Which is awesome. I love that movie when I was a small child.
So let me rattle off these movies. I will rattle these off in the order in which he did them thereafter. Escape from New York.
But only do the well-known ones because
they're all well-known.
Okay, all right.
So The Thing, which was a great movie, a remake. He was MacReady in that, which is a monster underneath the sea in Antarctica.
See, I haven't actually seen many of Kurt Russell's movies, so I cannot offer any commentary on
That's
most of these.
Also a John Carpenter movie. So he worked with John Carpenter in Escape from New York. Silkwood, Swing Shift, The Mean Season, The Best of Times, Big Trouble in Little China, Overboard, Tequila Sunrise, Winter People, Tango and Cash, Backdraft, Unlawful Entry, Captain Ron, Tombstone,
Captain Ron.
Forrest Gump. He played Elvis Presley. He was uncredited in that role.
So he again was Elvis.
Yeah, again was Elvis, and that was in the one scene where Forrest and Elvis are in the same scene. Stargate, Executive Decision, Escape from L.A. And so that's all the way to 96. So that's from 82 to 96. He was in a series of... Now, those are not blockbuster movies.
But those are some...
But there's some solid movies there.
Yeah, those are very well-known 80s and 90s movies. Some of them are even cult classics.
Right.
But what could he have been in that he was either considered for and didn't end up getting or turned down, actually?
So... Where do we begin with this?
This is why we were saying he could have been Harrison Ford if different career paths had been followed.
So he, the first one of note that I encounter that he could have been, he was considered for the role of Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon.
Which basically made Mel Gibson's career in America.
Exactly. So that's the first one. Mm-hmm. Let's see. As I scroll down to see what other ones. He was considered for Chris Cooper's role in Jarhead, which was 2005.
He auditioned for Han Solo.
He auditioned for the role of Han Solo in Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, which, as we all know, is the first Star Wars.
Which is just called Star Wars.
He was originally the choice for Church in The Expendables, which he turned down, and the role went to Bruce Willis.
He was considered for John McClane in Die Hard, which also went to Bruce Willis, and Die Hard is one of my top 10 all-time movies. And I defy you to say that it is not a Christmas movie. I'm just going to throw that down there right there.
Well, that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole different podcast, right?
Here's one that's going to blow your socks off. He was considered for the role of Travis Bickle in Taxi Driver.
Which I haven't seen, so I can't.
You're talking to me? You're talking to me? There's no one else here. You must be talking to me.
So you can imagine Kurt Russell in that role. Or could you? I don't know. He turned down Richard Gere's roles in An Officer and a Gentleman and Internal Affairs.
And apparently the role of Crash Davis, which went to Kevin Costner, was written for Kurt Russell. I don't know if
because of the baseball connection, because Kurt Russell was a legit baseball player.
And there are more.
So he was offered the role of Alan Grant in Jurassic Park. The asking price was too high, so the role went to Sam Neill.
Whoa. No way.
And he turned down the role of Connor McLeod in Highlander.
I've never seen Highlander.
Which is also a huge cult movie, in order to star in Big Trouble in Little China.
Which is
a similar cult following, so that's a bit of a wash. Connor McLeod was obviously played by Christopher Lambert.
I've driven a Highlander, but I've never seen Highlander. Brought to you by Toyota.
He was considered to play Batman and Bruce Wayne in the first Batman of 1989 and Batman Forever in 1995. He was also considered to play James Gordon in Batman Begins.
Wow.
And he was considered for the lead role of Cliff Secord in The Rocketeer, which went to Billy Campbell. So there's many examples here of him being considered. So he was also considered for Kevin Costner's role in The Untouchables and also
Field of Dreams.
In Field of Dreams. So there's a Kevin Costner theme going on throughout this. Oh, and here's another one. Tom Cruise wanted Kurt Russell for the role of Rowdy Burns in Days of Thunder.
No, I've seen Days of Thunder. That came out when I was in high school, even though I'm only 29 years old.
Yes. I mean, yes.
So he's got a very good track record. He's a solid B-list guy. He's been solidly B-list for 30, 40 years. He's got a very good body of work behind him. And considering most actors would kill for his career, that's a very good career.
He's made a really solid living, too.
Right. But considering
what could have been.
What could have been any single one of those roles. John McClane, Riggs in Lethal Weapon, the Field of Dreams role.
Franchise movies
that Han Solo.
Right.
Even though you can't imagine anybody but Kevin Costner playing Crash Davis or Harrison Ford playing Han Solo.
But Snake Plissken is essentially Han Solo. That's in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, wisecracking.
And wisecracking.
Anti-hero.
Right. And the movie was made after 1997's Star Wars, whatever they're calling it. Mm-hmm. The first one.
Right.
So there is maybe a sense that, I missed an opportunity there. Mm-hmm. Give me a science fiction movie, and here it is, Snake Plissken.
Right.
But if he had been Han Solo,
right,
I think it still would have been pretty good.
Right, totally. I can see him as Crash Davis. I can see him as John McClane.
Harrison Ford was fantastic, and he's that role, and nobody's even the new kid who's coming along to play him in the new Solo, a Star Wars movie or whatever it's called,
which I'm not looking forward to.
So he's
just generic white guy actor.
But I don't think that. I think that's a tough role to play.
Yeah,
but
following Harrison Ford's footsteps.
Yeah, Kurt Russell would have been great in that too, I think. So, yes, what could have been for Kurt Russell? I mean...
And we don't know with any of these, did he turn them down?
Well, the ones that we know, it says he turned them down, he declined, but there are many of them where it says he was considered. Now, considered is a very open term.
Right, did his agent... get the script and pass it along, and that was the end of that, or
was he mentioned in gossip?
Right?
Blogs
Was it
and
gossip blogs in 1977? Well, it's between Kurt Russell and Harrison Ford for this, wisecracking anti-hero. And
I'm hearing on the down low and on the QT that's
very hush hush,
that Kurt Russell is in the running for this witty, funny anti-hero in a new science fiction movie.
Soap opera called Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Right.
Starring Carrie Fisher.
Right. So any one of those movies could have been in a different stratosphere. I mean, Harrison Ford is A+++ list forever. Right. And one of the reasons for that is Han Solo.
Right.
And if you put Kurt Russell as Han Solo or Riggs or John McClane, what does that do to his career?
Yeah. He becomes the action movie guy. Mm-hmm. He was in a lot of action movies, but he wasn't in any sort of action movie that became iconic.
Right,
like
stratospheric.
Die Hard, or Star Wars, or Lethal Weapon.
Right.
He wasn't really. I mean, he was in one of my top 5 movies of all time.
What's that?
Which was Tequila Sunrise.
Which I have not seen.
Robert Towne wrote and directed. Robert Towne did another famous Chinatown with
Jack Nicholson, who you love.
Yes, I'm a big, huge Jack Nicholson fan. Sarcasm.
Now you're being sarcastic. I can never tell.
How am I going to pay for all that sarcasm? But the Tequila Sunrise movie, fantastic. In that, starring 3 of probably the most beautiful people in Hollywood at that time. So Kurt Russell, who's got dreamy blue eyes.
And feathered, beautiful hair.
Beautiful feathered hair. He didn't in this movie, so I'll get to that.
Michelle Pfeiffer.
Oh, you spoiled it.
I'm
Michelle
sorry.
Pfeiffer, who is also dreamy and has dreamy blue eyes, I believe. And, of course, our man...
Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson.
Oh, dear.
So in that movie, why I love that movie so much is because it goes against type. In those days, it was... You have to remember that... let's see. It was released in 1998.
What?
So,
Tequila Sunrise was not released in 98. That was
sure
released.
was.
No, it was released in like the 80s.
sorry, 1988.
Okay.
1988.
I was going to say there was no way that was released when I was in college.
1988. Who's been drinking the wine and who has not been drinking the wine? So 1988. But you have to think of all the other movies that were around that in those days.
Right.
So he plays the detective investigating his buddy, who is Mel Gibson, who's suspected of being a drug dealer. Mel Gibson has a family, he has a kid, he looks after him. He's really trying to make ends meet. The cop is wearing slick back hair, who is Kurt Russell.
So
smokes.
Miami Vice-ish.
So it's Miami Vice-ish because you don't really know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. So it's obvious that the drug dealer is supposed to be the bad guy and the cop is supposed to be the good guy. But there's a crossover there and there's some funny business going on. And then, of course, Michelle Pfeiffer drops in the middle there and she gets caught between the two of them and she's trying to, do I go with this guy? Do I go with that guy? But it's really well written. Music is great. The soundtrack is great. The cinematography is fantastic. The tension is really good. The characters are really good. So that's one of my top 5 movies. But if you think of any other, like Backdraft, maybe. Backdraft was kind of an interesting movie in those days. He was in that.
And I feel like
1991.
Backdraft, caught the wave of Billy Baldwin being the up-and-coming Hollywood heartthrob.
Yeah.
So a lot of... It was an action movie, and it was fire, and...
Yeah.
It had Billy Baldwin, so you have like a demographic of ladies who's going to go see it, who maybe wouldn't go see it because it's action and it's fire. And
there's a lot of good-looking guys in that movie too, right? Like that was Kurt Russell, as you say, William Baldwin, Robert De Niro. He's not really a good
I don't remember
guy.
him being in that.
Yeah, he was Donald Rimgale, who was an investigator type guy.
This came out when I was like a freshman in high school, so I don't remember anything about this.
But that was a really good, interesting movie. Donald Sutherland was the crazy pyromaniac in that one.
Donald Sutherland is crazy and everything.
He was great in that.
Speaking of casting to type.
And as we mentioned in a previous podcast, which I hope you will go back and listen to, this was directed by Ron Howard.
Oh, Ron Howard. All right.
So anyway, so that was also a very interesting movie, very compelling.
Well, I feel like, not to derail things here for a sec, but we did talk about he turned down many franchise starring roles. He was in a franchise. He was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
That's true.
He played Star-Lord's father. He was good in the role. I didn't love the movie. I'm the only person in the world who didn't love it. I liked the first Guardians of the Galaxy better. This is a topic for another podcast. But he has been in a crazy, super big, blockbuster franchise movie. But, spoiler alert, he died at the end of the movie. So, although he was sort of like a god type character.
You never know with those movies if people are really dead.
Superhero movies, people can come back.
As we know with
Avengers Infinity War.
We're going to see the whatever the next one is probably Avengers A New Hope or something like that.
Right.
And everybody's going to come back to life. It's sort of like the soap operas, like we were joking about as Dallas, but also in the soap operas where the daytime soap operas where people would come back to life.
Right. They've been dead for 16 years and you buried the body. Oh, but it turns out they were actually kidnapped on an island. And that body that was buried was some random corpse from the morgue. I don't know.
Or the same actor would come back and play a completely different role, but they were like the twin brother of the person who died or something like that. So he has been in, he's also been in late career to your point, late career franchises. He's been in the Furious
The Fast
7
and the Furious.
and the Fate of the Furious, 2 movies, obviously, in the Fast and the Furious franchise.
Which is somehow a huge deal.
It's cars, man. It's cars racing and guys getting mad.
If you want to watch it, I'll watch it.
It's I saw the first one.
And you were
And that
good?
was good. I think that was pretty much good.
Yeah.
It's the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
But yes, Kurt Russell, an appreciation.
Yes. And why do you think things didn't work out with any single one of those roles? Like, I theorized before we started recording, I wasn't sure if it was simply he has like a bad picker and he just, passes on like, oh, Die Hard, it's a Nakatomi Plaza, nobody can pronounce that, like, weird Christmas movie, I don't know. Or is it like he knew he just didn't want that level of fame? Like, I don't want that level of fame. I don't want the Harrison Ford level of fame. Like, not that I'm going to get it from this podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say you're verging on that level of fame right now. Are you sure you want to go on that limb?
But I don't want to hire bodyguards. I don't want to have people like nut jobs like stalking me. Like, I don't want to have the paparazzi staked out like when I'm in Victoria's Secret trying on lingerie. Like, so
You have no problems trying to get me to go away.
right? So, but I want you here. That's the difference. So, like, is it he's got a bad picker, or he's getting bad advice, or does he?
So it's
does he just not want that level of fame, and he's happy with where he's at and his family and the money? Because we're saying he could have had like a crazy huge career, but he's had an excellent career.
He's had a very
by
good career.
Hollywood standards. He's been working steadily for 50 years. That's insane.
I would call him the working man superstar. So he's just like he's the star of these movies. Mm-hmm. They're not the biggest movies, but they're one notch down from the biggest movies.
And everybody knows his name. Everybody knows Kurt Russell.
Know Kurt Russell, yeah,
right?
Exactly.
You're not like, oh, I saw that guy in that one episode of Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23.
And he was like the computer that wore tennis shoes. What was his name again?
Right. So
like he's been around forever.
So what do you think?
He's got name recognition. I think it's either one or the other. I think it's either he's got terrible either advice. He's getting terrible advice from his agent.
Right.
He's got a bad picker. Mm-hmm. Or the other end of the scale is he's the wisest man in Hollywood. Oh, yeah. And he's just happy, just plugging away, getting his stuff. He's got a family. He's got a family with Goldie Hawn, who we haven't mentioned yet in this podcast. But he's got a family. He wants to raise his family. His son was a hockey player. They moved to Vancouver for a while so that his son could play. So maybe he's making some really wise choices there. I mean, it's got to be one or the other.
He's got a very charmed life.
It's not like he's scraping money together. I better take this role as Elvis because I need the money. I mean, the other factor here too is that even though he's been around forever, he hasn't really been nominated for much of anything.
Right. He's never been nominated for an Oscar. He's been nominated for the Emmy for the Elvis movie.
Primetime Emmy.
Like we mentioned.
Which brought him to attention to everybody. And he was nominated for a Golden Globe for his role in Silkwood, which a lot of people, I think, at the time thought he was going to get nominated for an Oscar for as well, and that didn't pan out.
Because Meryl Streep won an Oscar for Silkwood, correct?
Right. It was an award-winning movie.
Yeah, that's one of her 3 Oscars, I believe.
And... and so, but he's also, we shouldn't downplay the other awards that he's been nominated for.
What would those be, Dalt?
So the one role that we haven't mentioned that was sort of iconic in many ways, and since hockey is in our podcast logo,
Miracle.
We should talk about Miracle. He was nominated by ARP's Movies for Grown-Ups.
AARP?
AARP.
Are you kidding me?
He was nominated as Best Actor for Miracle, as playing Herb Brooks in that movie. Obviously, that's the story of Team USA coming back and winning the gold medal in the 1980 Olympics, for those who don't know, for those 5 people who don't know.
I'm going to say this. I'm not usually a super jingoistic, rah-rah USA person, but if you're American and you do not tear up at the end of The Miracle on Ice when Al Michaels says, "Do you believe in miracles?" Yes. Like, you are dead. You are dead inside.
Or Canadian.
Or, I said if you're American.
Oh, right.
I mean, that's amazing. Like, that gets me
It's a
every
very
single
inspiring
time.
movie. It's a Disney movie.
Right.
I remember when it came out, and there were a lot of people like, what are they going going to do to this movie? What are they going to do to this story?
And that was right after Herb Brooks actually died in
Right.
real life, too. So I remember there was actually a lot of awards buzz around Kurt Russell.
and
like that year.
justifiably, and
Yeah.
not just around the AARP movie awards. Buzz.
Right.
There was more than that, but he was really good in that. And being a hockey guy, that was a legit. He played that well, and he played a good role, and it was a legit hockey movie. You could tell that some of the actors were actually skating and they knew hockey and stuff like that, rather than like Rob Lowe running around in his running shoes in the movie that he was in, which I can't think of.
Youngheart?
Youngblood.
Youngblood, yeah.
Youngblood.
I seem to remember at the time Miracle came out, they actually said that they had cast hockey players and taught them how to act.
Yeah.
Because that would be easier than casting actors and teaching them how to skate. Because
Because-
they wanted that realism.
Because hockey is hard.
I can't skate. You know
can't
that.
hockey?
I can't, no.
So he was also nominated for a Hollywood Film Award
Oh,
as part of the Ensemble of the Year, or how do you say that in American?
ensemble.
Ensemble. The Ensemble for The Hateful Eight.
We did say he has had a bit of a career resurgence
Yep.
in the past 10 years or so. So he's been in some Tarantino movies. He's been in the Guardians of the Galaxy. He's been in the Fast and the Furious franchise. Like, it seems, what is it? This is a topic for another podcast, but geez, all these guys with late career resurgences, and it just doesn't seem to happen for ladies.
Well, and I'm thinking that hopefully that will change because we've got a lot of platforms now, a lot of studios making movies,
Right. And-
a lot more
and-
so than usual.
And speaking of, he is going to be in a Netflix Christmas movie coming out this holiday season, 2018. He's playing Santa.
Because we need more Christmas movies.
I mean, at some point, Die Hard is just going to get old as a Christmas movie, and we need more.
I think we need more Canada Day movies.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I mean, he had a house in Canada, so
He did. He had one on in the Muskokas, where I have been many a year. Actually, for my friends who are listening, we go to the Boys' Weekend every August, and the cottages is nearby from where Kurt and Goldie used to be.
Why are they no longer there?
They're no longer there because they don't like the paparazzi and the tourists floating by, peeping in with their binos on their lakefront house.
The paparazzi will find you even in Muskoka.
Even in Muskoka.
Even Muskoka. And imagine how it would be if you were Harrison Ford.
So just to show you the broad range of, we talked in very positive terms about Kurt Russell's work in Miracle. Mm-hmm. And it was actually praised at the time when it came out. And so he was also nominated for the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards for Worst Fake Accent by a Male in Miracle. Because he had a little bit of a Boston accent in that.
I thought Herb Brooks was from Minnesota.
Oh, well, maybe that's why it was so bad.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought it was Boston.
I could look that up on the Google if you want to.
I think you're right.
Oh, okay.
I think you know more about hockey than I do, so...
No, that's not true. Remember, the reason why the first word in the tagline is hockey, culture life, is because you're the hockey guy.
I get to go first? Is that what the deal is?
You do. It's true.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's true.
So, let's wrap this up about Kurt Russell,
Let's do it.
because we've talked a lot about him. So, the conclusion is underappreciated, underrated, but solid actor.
Definitely.
And he needs to get more props, is what he needs.
He totally does. I would love to see him. He is. He's got a late career renaissance going on, and I would love to see him actually get a really good meaty role and actually finally get an Oscar nomination. Because when we were actually researching this before we hit record, which I know stuns our
We were rehearsing.
tens of listeners. Like we mentioned, the Lethal Weapon franchise basically made Mel Gibson's career in America. And if you look at his career beyond that, the roles that he's gotten nominated for so many awards. He's won a couple Oscars because he was Riggs. So it would be really nice if, even though Kurt Russell is by no means flying under the radar, he's
But you want your favorite people to get appreciated. And I think
right. And he's got the body of work behind him. He's got the chops.
When you're in those box office blowout blockbusters, it enables you to do other things. It enables you to do art house movies. It enables you to do movies that are going to get nominated for awards. And so Kurt Russell's not really there in that regard. So he's not getting those next calls. Whereas after Lethal Weapon comes out, hey, do you want to make a movie, or here's a bunch of money,
Right.
make Braveheart.
Right, exactly.
So it's the result of being in these blockbuster movies that enables you to do other things, and Kurt Russell hasn't been able to do that for the extent that the other guys have been able to do.
Right.
So yeah, it would be nice to see him get some sort of really cool art house movie that that he's going to get nominated for, maybe directing, or maybe
Right.
if he's interested in that.
But again,
Maybe another hockey movie.
right, maybe another hockey movie. But again, like I mentioned, maybe that's not what he wants. Maybe he's happy just going, onto a set for 2 months, playing Herb Brooks or whatever, and then he leaves and then he goes home to his family and he's good until
Yeah.
the next project comes along. Like maybe he doesn't, we mentioned Seven, maybe he doesn't want to be Brad Pitt, which I hate to say, but maybe he doesn't want to be like that sort of producer, like fingers in all the pies, like of all the movies that are going to be like Oscar baity. Like maybe he just wants to, play Herb Brooks until 9:00 in the evening and then go home and have a beer with Goldie and go to bed. Like,
But you've got to think that because he's been around for so long, you've got to think that he probably gets the paparazzi. Like he probably gets
Yeah.
people coming up to him in a restaurant and saying, "Oh, I loved you in Tango and Cash."
Right.
So he probably does get a lot of the pestering that most people get. So I don't know how much less it would be or more it would be one way or the other.
and he's definitely going to get a lot of attention now because the Overboard remake is coming out, which
Which is one of your top 5, right?
I wouldn't say it's one of my top 5, but I did not appreciate it when it came out because it came out when I was in middle school, but then I watched it like in college and I was like, I can appreciate this now because I'm actually old enough to get it. So I think we should actually watch it at some point, but I don't need to see the remake.
So
we saw the trailer for it and I was like, yeah.
Well, the roles are reversed, right? So it's,
Right. Right, the lady is now the working class hero and the guy is the rich, obnoxious,
right.
like, a-hole with amnesia.
So we talked about him making big box office money. He was there's a salary listing here on IMDb of some of his movies. So he's making some good coin. Like Stargate, he made $7 million. Executive Decision, he made $7.5. Escape from LA, he made $10 million.
Wow.
Breakdown, $15 million. Soldier was another movie we didn't talk about. He was a hero in that, the lead in that. $15 million. And Vanilla Sky got $5 million, which is not a very big role in that movie. So that's from 94 to 2001. So that's probably in the meat of his career.
Right. And which movie did we say his asking price was too high for, so it went to somebody else?
That I would have to go back and review the tape.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But there was one.
Right. Rewind, dear listener, and go back to the first 5 minutes of the podcast.
But so he's not hurting for cash.
Right.
And he's making, like you said, he's making a solid living. And he's doing what he's doing, and he's a blue collar superstar.
Right.
That's the way I would say it.
That's totes it. We
So-
gonna wrap it up on that note?
I think that it's a good place to stop when we talk about the blue collar superstar named Kurt Russell.
I would also like to give a shout out to Isaac Hayes' Hoopty with chandeliers on the hood in Escape from New York. I really want to put chandeliers on the hood of my Prius
The best villain car ever.
and drive around Connecticut like that. That would be amazing.
And the whole reason we watched that movie, by the way, which was Escape from New York, was because we wanted to see St. Louis landmarks.
Right, St. Louis doubling as a post-apocalyptic New York.
Pretty nasty New York, yes.
Yeah, and there were times when I was like, oh yeah, that's downtown. So
There's the shed. There's the train shed at Union Station.
Union Station, right?
Yeah. Okay, for another week, I'm not Coco.
And I'm not Daltz.